Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and memories of a past life driving you to kill your spouse. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Night of Dark Shadows. This 1971 gothic horror film is set in the fictional coastal town of Collinsport, Maine. A young artist, Quentin Collins, inherits a spooky mansion that has been in his family for generations, and he moves into the house with his wife Tracy. Quentin becomes tormented by strange, dark dreams that seem to echo his clan's macabre history. Eventually, the ghost of Angelique, one of Quentin's ancestors, appears to him, and he starts to take on bizarre and violent behavior. Night of Dark Shadows was co-written, directed, and produced by Dan Curtis, who brought us Burnt Offerings, Trilogy of Terror, and The Night Strangler. He's also the creator of the Dark Shadows TV series. This is the second film based on Dark Shadows, following the previous year's House of Dark Shadows. Okay, bear with me while I break down this series and its timeline. The series Dark Shadows aired on ABC from 1966 to 1971 and blended melodrama, romance, horror, and supernatural fantasy in a way TV audiences had never really seen before. The show's story centered on the wealthy and deeply cursed Collins family living in the mansion known as Collinwood. The early episodes were more of a gothic mystery inspired by novels like Rebecca, but the show exploded in popularity after the arrival of vampire Barnabas Collins, played by Jonathan Frid. Barnabas quickly became the heart of the series as a tragic, lonely anti-hero struggling against his own nature. The show aired live on tape at a breakneck pace, producing over 1,200 episodes in just 6 years. On top of this, Dan Curtis created 2 theatrical films based on the show. There's 1970's House of Dark Shadows, which is essentially a darker, more condensed retelling of the Barnabas Collins storyline from the TV show. And finally, there's the film we're covering today, 1971's Night of Dark Shadows. This second film is more of a standalone gothic ghost story, but it does adapt a lot of prior storylines into a condensed plot. It focuses on Quentin Collins and does not feature the beloved vampire. And more as a side note, the show was also the inspiration for the 2012 Tim Burton film, also called Dark Shadows. So this is all to say that this film is kind of a sequel to a film that is kind of a retelling of a TV show. But it's also kind of designed to be its own standalone film, so you're okay going in with no prior knowledge. And to somewhat add to the confusion, a lot of the actors from the show also play characters in both of these films. A lot of the actors played several characters on the show, and some of them are playing those same characters, different characters, or brand new characters here, so they may not line up with exactly who you remember them as if you're a fan of the show. David Selby reprises his role as protagonist Quentin Collins. The film also stars Grayson Hall as Carlotta Drake, John Carlin as Alex Jenkins, Nancy Barrett as Claire Jenkins, and Lara Parker as Angelique Collins. I'm pretty sure I called her Angelique in the opening. I always think of Angelique from Hellraiser 4, so it's kind of cemented in my brain that way, but it's Angelique here, and I'm going to try to say that through the rest of the script. Cinematography was handled by Richard Shore of Bang the Drum Slowly. Shout out Michael Moriarty, go watch my review of Q if you haven't. A lot of fans and critics think the cinematography is one of the movie's biggest strengths, especially compared to the faster, flatter visual style of the original TV series. Because the film wasn't being shot under the crushing daily schedule of daytime television, Dan Curtis and Shore had more time to create elaborate lighting and camera setups. The score was composed by Bob Cobert, regular Curtis collaborator. He worked on Dark Shadows, House of Dark Shadows, Burnt Offerings, Trilogy of Terror, and basically everything else Curtis directed. Night of Dark Shadows was shot in just 6 weeks on a budget of just $900,000. And the real kicker here is that Curtis was actually forced to cut 35 minutes out of his film by MGM, and apparently he was only given 24 hours to do it. This led to some unavoidable issues with the film's sound and music mixing, as well as the overall pacing and plot of the film. It was released to theaters in 1971 once the show had officially gone off the air and grossed around $1.4 million. Unfortunately, it pretty much received negative reviews from critics, with Roger Ebert giving it 1 out of 4 stars. Today, the film is reassessed a bit more positively. It is mostly valued by fans of Dark Shadows for its atmosphere, tone, and cast performances, especially David Selby and Lara Parker. It is generally considered weaker than House of Dark Shadows, though. It doesn't have a critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, but does have a 40% audience score. It also has a 2.9 on Letterboxd, so it seems to be a pretty mixed bag. Thank you so much to my patron Brad for requesting Night of Dark Shadows for me to review. For full transparency, I knew of the show's existence but had never seen it before and had never even heard of the movies before until Brad made this request, so I did a little bit of homework before jumping in. I watched a couple of reviews of the other movie and then watched a couple of the actual episodes of the original Dark Shadows to kind of just prep myself and get a sense of the world and the storytelling, but I did not watch any reviews of this prior to watching it, and I did not watch all 1,200 episodes of the show. All of that's to say that I am probably not the best expert on the internet about how this movie connects to the show and the other movie. There's probably much more knowledgeable people on the internet when it comes to that, but I'm here to have some fun and watch a movie today, so we should probably jump into it. I hope you all are ready for a fuck ton of close-ups of people staring at each other with big ol' eyes, because we're watching Night of Dark Shadows. The movie opens with Quentin Collins and his wife Tracy as they arrive at his newly inherited home. The 200-acre estate, known as Collinwood, has been in his family for generations. They meet their housekeeper, Carlotta Drake, who has lived at Collinwood her entire life. She doesn't seem pleased with Quentin's disinterest in house traditions like tea parties. Quentin, who is a painter himself, is especially taken by a painting of one of his ancestors. Her name was Angelique Collins, and she died in 1810. Perhaps she was hung to death? The couple settles in for their first night, and Quentin feels like he is finally at his true home. That night, though, Quentin dreams of his troubled ancestors. Through these dreams, visions, and some exposition dumps by Carlotta, we learn about the life and death of Charles Collins. I'm going to explain the bulk of this backstory now to make it a little easier for everyone. Charles, the patriarch of the Collins family in the early 19th century, began having an affair with his brother Gabriel's wife, Angelique. Charles learned that Angelique was actually a witch and that she had cast a spell upon him, which forced him to fall in love with her. Gabriel learned of his wife's supernatural heritage as well as her extramarital indiscretions with Charles. Gabriel alerted a local clergyman named Reverend Strack, who promptly had Angelique arrested for witchcraft.
Prepare yourself for eternity, witch!
And like you do, she was promptly found guilty and hung to death. This apparently caused Charles to go insane, and he tracked Reverend Strack down and trampled him to death beneath the feet of his horse. Gabriel got the last laugh though, sealing Charles away in the family crypt with Angelique's corpse while he was still alive. Back to 1970, Quentin meets Gerard Stiles, the stable hand and Carlotta's nephew. He has a stutter and isn't too good with words. The Collins are visited by their friends Alex and Claire Jenkins. They are a pair of horror novelists and move into a cottage on the estate at apparently no charge. Quentin sets up his painting studio in the building's highest tower, where he discovers more paintings made by Charles, including another ravishing portrait of Angelique. Along with the flashbacks, Quentin begins to see apparitions around Collinwood. This includes a little girl as well as a sexy Angelique. Gerard attacks Quentin in the middle of their ghostly makeout sesh, with the boys getting into an all-out brawl. Tracy tries to intervene, but the enraged Quentin begins strangling her. It seems he went into a bit of a fugue state, not recognizing Gerard or his wife. She is ridiculously forgiving about the whole strangulation thing. Alex nearly gets crushed to death inside this super cool greenhouse, and Tracy tells him what happened last night. Quentin moves his studio to a different room, much to Carlotta's chagrin, who finally reveals the truth to him. The ghost he saw is Sarah Castle, who lived here 150 years ago. Carlotta claims to be the reincarnation of Sarah, and says that Quentin is the reincarnation of Charles Collins. She thinks back to her past life.
All week long, strange tensions had been building in the house. Tensions I did not understand. Everyone did not love my Angelique as I did.
She She witnessed Strack, Gabriel, and Charles's wife Laura conspiring against Angelique. Gabriel was hesitant while the other two were chomping at the bit to execute her for witchcraft. She hugged Angelique goodbye, and she gave Sarah a pendant that would allow her to remember Angelique forever. She used it to telepathically speak to Sarah before her hanging, saying one day her love will allow her to live again and reconnect with Charles.
You will help me, Sarah. You will know when the time comes, for it is your love that will keep me alive.
Quentin refuses to believe he's a reincarnation of Charles, declaring nothing will stop him from loving Tracy. Carlotta says if he truly believes that, he and Tracy ought to leave Collinwood while they still can. Because if he stays, there won't be room for Mrs. Collins. And Quentin doesn't share any of this with his wife. Love that. The Jenkins head to New York for a few days with a side mission of researching the paintings of Charles Collins. Tracy finds her husband in that pesky tower in the dead of night, who tells her that he's disgusted by her and never wants to see her again. Carlotta suggests to Tracy that she doesn't belong here, which I think is her best attempt at saving her life. Tracy sneaks into the tower while Quentin is grocery shopping, where she finds a painting of Quentin carrying her maybe dead body? Uh-oh. Quentin catches her in the act, but he's a nice guy right now and reassures his love for her. Oh shit, now he's Charles again. He starts getting real gropey and threatens to touch her whenever and however he pleases. Alex and Claire return from New York with the newfound knowledge that Quentin is the spitting image of Charles, aside from a distinct scar that he had on his face. They've brought a painting of Charles back with them, hoping this uncanny shit will convince Quentin to leave. That night, Alex is attacked by the ghost of Angelique. He lives though. Tracy is drawn to the outside pool where Charles confronts who he thinks is Laura trying to spy on him and his murdered lover. He eats her into the nasty pool water and tries to drown her. The Jenkins arrive in the nick of time and resuscitate her though. Alex, after breaking through Carlotta and Gerard, confronts Quentin about what this house has been doing to him. Quentin doesn't believe any of it though, declaring that he wants him, Claire, and Tracy off his property for good. Fuck you guys, I've got my super cool reincarnated family now, losers. It isn't until he sees the scratch marks on his arms that he realizes he truly attacked Tracy. Carlotta reveals that Gerard is on his way to eliminate Quentin's pesky loved ones for good. Quentin has enough of himself left to realize that's no good, rushing after them. Gerard tries to run Alex off the road, with the boys going full Fast and Furious for a minute before Alex rams right into a tree. Gerard makes his way to the cottage, unaware that Claire is a fucking gangster and don't play that shit. Oh wow, she shoots him in the fucking face. Somehow the freak survives that and has enough strength to kidnap Tracy though. He starts sexually assaulting Tracy in his truck before Quentin finally tracks them down, which means it's time for the boys to have a final showdown on top of this train trestle. Place your bet on which abuser you think will win. Gerard slashes Quentin's face, leaving a scar that looks a lot like Charles. Tracy rolls up and bonks him with a 2x4 though, sending him down to his death. The foursome rush back to Collinwood to kill Carlotta. Okay, cool. Oh, okay y'all, I'm not sure the candelabras are necessary. Tracy gets yoinked into a secret tunnel while searching the crypts where she's attacked by Angelique. Alex confronts Carlotta on the roof, but when Angelique beckons to her from the ground, she just fucking yeets herself off. Because Carlotta was the one keeping her spirit alive, this causes Angelique to disappear before she can kill Tracy. We jump some time ahead and Quentin is selling Collinwood. The group is departing for greener pastures, although Quentin obviously needs to pick up his canvases before they can leave for good. What could possibly fucking go wrong? The stupid bastard doesn't come back, so Tracy reluctantly heads upstairs to find him. Up in the tower, Quentin has been fully possessed by Charles, which has somehow resurrected Angelique in the flesh. The movie ends with a UPI newswire, which reveals that Alex and Claire Jenkins were killed in a car accident just after leaving the property. Witnesses reported seeing a ghostly fog filling the car as it veered off the road. And that's Night of Dark Shadows. Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this one. I'd say overall its real strengths are in its mood and atmosphere. Dan Curtis creates a melancholy, dreamlike world filled with candlelit hallways, wooded landscapes, and supernatural dread. The cinematography gives the film a rich gothic look that often resembles a Hammer horror production. I especially love the flashback scenes, which really have a genuine 19th century look and vibe to them. And the house itself makes for the perfect setting. Of course, this place is fucking filled with ghosts. And from what I was able to see, the film feels and looks a lot more polished than the TV series, and the longer format allowed them to build a lot more atmosphere than a really quick episode allows you to. The score is also a highlight. It feels appropriately haunting, although it's a little bit repetitive. The actors all turn in really strong performances. They're another real highlight of the film for me, although I guess that should be somewhat expected considering some of them have been playing these characters for years now. David Selby is super convincing as he bounces between sweet, concerned Quentin and angry, erratic Charles. Kate Jackson also holds down the film as Tracy, growing increasingly concerned throughout the story. Grayson Hall is as spooky as ever as Carlotta, and Lara Parker is haunting as Angelique. I do wish we got more of her character though. For me, the film's biggest weakness is its lack of coherence, particularly around the character of Angelique. We learn about Charles and Angelique largely through secondhand stories and out-of-sync flashbacks, although I do think those come together by the end to fully flesh out what happened. The real problem is we don't really get a sense of why it all happened. That bit I told you about Angelique using a love potion to make Charles fall in love with her, that's not mentioned here. It was in the film's wiki page, not just the TV page, but the wiki page for the film as well, so I included it in here. But from what I could tell, it was not mentioned here, and Charles and Angelique actually just fell madly in love. That on its own isn't necessarily an issue, but the bigger theme that I'm kind of starting to point towards is that Angelique is meant to be this big, powerful witch, but we really don't understand her motives at all. Apparently, she was evil and killed a priest, which was mentioned very quickly in passing in one of the flashbacks, but that happens off-screen and without explanation or proof. The only thing she seems to care about is banging Charles and killing his wife. Her character just feels incomplete and unresolved, as do several other characters as well as plot developments. This is largely because MGM made Curtis cut 35 minutes from the film with only 24 hours notice, which is a huge amount and a ridiculous turnaround time. There are several issues where in the film a certain sound element or the music will really abruptly cut off in like the middle of a note, indicating that there was more to this scene, but it got shaved off of the final piece. I obviously don't blame the filmmakers. It is in no way their fault when it comes to those things, but it doesn't change the fact that the film feels a bit unresolved and like there's pieces missing, because there are. I do have to wonder what kind of things were cut though, as the final product is kind of strange and I'm a bit unclear on what exactly it wanted to be. A lot of times it feels like it wanted to be a steamy, sexy ghost story, but just when things are getting heated up, we cut away. There's also very little violence, or even scares for that matter. It's much more of a drama than a horror. The film was actually rated PG, so it makes me wonder if several of the more adult components were cut out to help receive that rating. But for a 90-minute movie, this thing is really slow. There's a lot of long shots of people walking, driving, and doing other mundane things that could have maybe been shaved off so something else more important could have been kept in there. All of that said though, I was genuinely surprised by how dark the film got at certain points. It isn't scary in the typical horror movie way, but it dives pretty deep into spousal abuse in a way you don't see too often. The cruelty towards Tracy is what stuck with me most after the film. All in all though, I found Night of Dark Shadows to be a pretty mixed bag. I can see the bones of a really strong story here, but it seems like the bones are jumbled up and some of them are misplaced or missing, so you can't really complete the skeleton. The extensive cuts to the film caused some technical issues within the film, which honestly I'm not that bothered by. I watch a lot of shitty movies, but it also created a lot of plot and pacing issues, and perhaps most importantly, it made it difficult for me to really connect with the characters. But there are positives as well. While I felt a bit detached from the characters, I did think the actors turned in really great performances as them, and I also really appreciated the gothic atmosphere. What the film sometimes lacks in story is made up for in its haunting atmosphere, tragic romance, and David Selby's compelling performance. Even before the cuts, the film was very clearly going for a slightly surreal kind of approach, and I enjoyed watching Quentin shift between past and present, fear and rage, and sanity and insanity. It's a slow, creeping horror film that is more focused on building a sense of doom than outright scaring its audience, and it builds that dread effectively. I do think there are stronger films that have a similar theme or tone or story beat, things like The Innocents, The Haunting, and Curtis's own Burnt Offerings. But this was made for a lot less on a way quicker timeline, so I do respect what they were able to do given some pretty strict parameters. But if you're in the mood for an early 70s gothic ghost story, I do think Night of Dark Shadows is worth the watch. I imagine you'd get more out of it if you're familiar with the show and film that came before this one, but it does work well as its own individual story in its own rights though. Well, that's about it. Thank you again to my patron Brad for requesting Night of Dark Shadows for me to review. Like I said, I had never seen the show or movies before this, so I got to learn a lot while doing some research and watching a couple of episodes. But have any of y'all seen Dark Shadows, House of Dark Shadows, or Night of Dark Shadows? And if so, what did you think of them? Be sure to share your thoughts, theories, and favorite moments down below in the comments. And be sure to join me next time as we watch A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead. It's gonna be a doozy. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks so much for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Night of Dark Shadows. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks, y'all.